So we're going to finish up our assessment of the data by looking at the questions. So if you recalled when we were using the ggplot function to provide frequency distribution bar plots, we took a look at the different questions, and there were several of the questions that had several thousand responses to them, while another subset of the questions had less than 500 responses to them. So we saw that our analysis is really going to look at just a portion of those questions, and those would be the questions that have the larger amount of responses to them. So that's what we're going to look into next, is to dig into the different questions to see which of these questions are going to want to include in our analysis. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a filter so that we are going to look at only those question IDs that have a count or frequency that is greater than 1,000. So these are going to be only the question IDs that have 1,000 or actually more than 1,000 responses. So if we go ahead and execute this, Control Enter, we can see there are 16 question IDs, and that's what the column X represents. So these are the IDs that have more than 1,000, and this is the count right over here. So all these have 2,000 plus responses. So these 16 questions, these are the ones that we're going to want to include in our analysis. So then let's take a look at these questions so that we can understand what the question text is. So if we take a look, we want to look at only distinct question IDs in the question text. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make a mental note, or we could write these down to see these, to note these question IDs. But when we execute this next question, next command, we're going to take a look at just unique question ID. So because our data set has a question ID for every time that question's issued. So like for question ID 34, we have 2,188 rows, but we only want to see that row once. So we're going to use this distinct function to pull only unique instances of each question ID. So if we hit Control Enter, we will execute that. So now what we did is we created a new set of data called questions, and if we double click on that, we can pull that up so that we can see both the question ID and the question text. So then what we can see is, for instance, that question 122, we can see what the text is there. And as we go through all these different questions, what we want to do is take a look at which question appears to be the most meaningful for this analysis. And so after taking a look at that, what I decided was that question 112 is going to be the most meaningful question. And that is, I learned the subject matter for this course. So that's going to be the target question that we're going to look at in our analysis. And we're going to try to find correlations between these other questions and question 112. So in other words, we're going to see, are there attributes from the survey that would indicate a successful experience for a student? And a successful experience meaning that the student responded favorably to question 112, I learned the subject matter. All right, so we're going to focus on question 112. So then what we're going to do is we're going to begin to narrow down the data in our assessment. Again, this isn't our analysis, it's just still our assessment. We're going to narrow down the data to look at just data around question 112. So we're going to pull the data and we're going to take a look. We're going to have a subset of data there. So if we open that up, so this is question 112, and here we're going to take a look at the term name and the response choice. For every time there was a response, we're noting the term name and what the response was. So with that data in hand, we're going to go ahead and plot some things. First, we're going to plot the frequency distribution of response choices to question 112. So Control Enter, and that will give us this plot. And we can see that we have a good distribution. And this is not the response description, but rather the numeric value. So this would be 5 would be the strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. So we can see that the response distribution for question 112 mimics that of all the questions, really, that it's really heavily skewed towards strongly agree. So that's some insight that we have about the distribution for kind of our success indicator for our classes. And so this is actually very positive data. So next, let's take a look at a bar plot, taking a look at the term name. So the terms in which question 112 was asked. So when we execute that, we can see that this question was asked in all surveys since fall of 2013. And we're basing that off of the x-axis here. So we know that we can use data from as far back as fall of 2013, and question 112 will be included in all that survey data. And we're also expecting to see very favorable results with question 112. And so this will be interesting to see what type of survey questions are going to indicate or have a correlation to question 112. So that's the information that we're gathering from our analysis. So with this information now, we're ready to move on to we just completed our assessment. So now we're able to take this data and move forward with our analysis, with having some ideas for how to design this analysis.